What's up, family? My name is Brother Mary. We'd like to welcome everyone to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club. We meet here every other Wednesday in honor of William Mackey Jr.
Wait.
You got it?
Okay.
Brother Assad, Louis Ray Rivera, Minister Khaled, El-Haj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X, Amos Wilson, Gil Noble, Attorney at War Alton Maddox, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Ivan Van Sertima, Renovo Rashidi, Brother Harold, Marcus Garvey, and all the historians who gave up fame and fortune to burn the midnight oil to bring the truth to the people. They could have went the other way. They could have took the money, but they didn't. So we honor these people. We never want to forget Professor Mackey and Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark and Miss Leola Maddox. But first, give the people a great big hand who came in to support the William Mackey Jr. History Club. Because in honor of Leola Maddox, who burned the midnight oil, she drove an old car. May she rest in peace, Ann with Alton, the United African Movement. And she drove that car to the UAM and she ate her dinner because she believed in bringing people together. She believed in coming to lectures. So we never want to forget Miss Leola Maddox and all the individuals. So we're going to bring the camera over to the Amos collection. This is the Health Sababu and African World Info Systems to continue the work of Amos Wilson. We got Blueprint for Black Power, Sababu's latest in honor of Amos, The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat for the Reclamation of the African Mind, Amos's classic, Black on Black Violence, The Psychodynamic of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination, African-Centered Consciousness versus the New World Order, Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children, Issues of Manhood in Black and White, and The Falsification of African Consciousness. Also, S.K. Damiana's Distorted Truths and the Bastardization of African Cosmology. So, we have these books to help Sababu continue the work of Amos Wilson. And we never want to forget Amos. Sababu is continuing the work. And one of the most important things you got to remember about Amos's book, Black on Black Violence, and it says the psychodynamic of black self-annihilation in service of white domination. And all over the globe, they're wondering how, why is black folks killing black folks? Well, we are still being controlled. We're still being manipulated to do ourselves in. And you see it every day. You hear people, big city mayors and every psychologist and talking head. Read Amos's book on black violence, Black on Black Violence, and you get an understanding. And also, The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat toward the Reclamation of the African Mind. Basically, we have to be reprogrammed. You have to understand, we have to be reprogrammed. So I have some books that I want to start mentioning in honor of Louis Ray Rivera. I want to give big thanks to Brother Louis Ray in his book, Jazz in Jail. Louis Ray Rivera, when Professor Mackey left us too soon, he came to the rescue. And he would come down here and he would speak. And Louis Ray would speak for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and we would walk him home, and he only lived 2 blocks away from Jefferson Avenue. And me and Sarah, and Brother Colvin, and we would walk them home, and then Louis Ray would still talk. And wouldn't go upstairs. And we finally said, all right, man, it's time to go, man. We'll see him later. So I never want to forget Brother Louis Ray, man. And he knew my whole family come up the Bed-Stuy community, graduated from the old Boys and Girls High. And they did at Dr. Mack's radio program, they did a documentary on Frank Mickens. So a lot of people went to the high. My brother Henry went to the high. You got weed spots all over the place. Medical marijuana. More weed spots than liquor stores. Everybody and their mama is selling this crazy stuff that everybody's smoking and you can't do nothing about it. And our legislators passed the bill for it to happen. Well, you could thank Lyndon LaRouche because he talks about a George Soros, the man behind the medical marijuana. And everybody is smoking this crap and it's just going crazy. So you see the people that's down with it. Another book that I'm talking about is in honor of Trust Graham, Nzinga of Angola. Trust did the lecture for Black History Month and he named this book, so we have this book in honor of Trust. Another book that for the listening audience to check out is Wayne Mansfield, The Manufacturing of a President, the CIA's insertion of Barack Hussein Obama into the White House. So if you really want to get the information, you got to read Wayne Mansfield's book on the CIA insertion of Barack Hussein Obama and how he was tricked. Excellent book, and there's another book by Dexter Tarpley that Brother Darren talks about. In honor of Dr. Randy Short, we have Mastering Slavery, the impact of religious slavery revealed, Dr. Randy Short out of Washington, D.C. So we have this book in honor of him. Another book that we picked up, I was strolling and I picked this book up, African Slavery in Latin America and the Caribbean. So you had slavery all over the Caribbean islands, all over the Latin islands. It wasn't just slavery in America. So when you look at the reparations phenomenon, you have to look at it globally. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah.
Who's this?
Who's this? Ray? Yeah, you have to look at it. Come on, what's going on?
Hey, Ray, which Ray is this? Ray from?
Okay, I'm busy. I'll call you back.
Okay.
Okay, you have to look at slavery worldwide. I got it. So I just picked this up. Another book, Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization. With all the great things that's supposed to have happened in the land of the black, everything was not peaches and cream. Chancellor Williams, in his book, gets into the mistakes that we made as a people and how the Arabs came in and conquered us too and put us into slavery, but nobody talks about the Arab slave trade. We want to give big ups to Chancellor Williams on his classic, The Destruction of Black Civilization. Everywhere you talk about. Also, this book is in honor of Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben, black man of the Nile and his family. And there wasn't too many computers around when Dr. Ben was doing his stuff, but he lays out a lot of information and how the pyramids and the religions and this and that was going on in the land of the black, the statues, and then how the Europeans just stole everything and how they went to school there. And next thing you know, we took a nap and we woke up and it was game over. So we never want to forget Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark. Everywhere you look, family, you see a study. Everybody's talking about a study. I was looking at King Leopold and Cecil Rhodes and how they cut the arms and the hands off for the rubber. Disgusting. And every time you turn around, it's another study. Well, this book, Without Sanctuary, and they have the postcards, the hangings in Mississippi. Strange fruit hanging from the tree in Lynchburg, Pennsylvania. Virginia, coming down, hanging from trees. The barber, the dogs. So all this, and every time you turn around, they're talking about another study on what happened. They must didn't have this book. They must didn't have this book. So this is another book they should get before they start running around talking about, let's have another study. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an individual that you're supposed to check out, and his name is George Soros, the man behind the curtain. And this is inside the secret network of George Soros. And when you read this book, you will see how much his hands is into everything. So when you want to read about a person, you always get the books. This is one book. Another book is The Shadow Party, how Soros, Hillary Clinton, and 60s radicals took complete control of the Democratic Party, and you can see their actions right now with all the stuff that's going on. Soros is behind it, and you don't get mad at me. All you got to do is get the books. And he's a master at trading. He's a collapsing governments. So he's one of the baddest investors out. And his money is spread all over the place. So get these publications and read about these people. Everybody want to talk about Elon Musk, the Musk man, who basically has a convoy of people looking into the waste of the government. The waste. The money going all over the place. Your tax dollars. So when you want to know about a person, you get the book. Get the books on them. Not CNN, the Cartoon Network, or MSNBC, or YouTube, and all that. Get the book and read the book on the individual that you want to know about. Because not everything can be put on social media, but a lot of the stuff could be put in the book. So read about Elon Musk. Another book in honor of Cynthia McKinney, who the people, in my opinion, the only person that cared about the people of Georgia. And when she ran for president, if you would have voted for her, it would have been good. But everybody wanted to vote for Kamala. But them people in Georgia did our sister Cynthia McKinney in. She's the only one, in my personal opinion, who cared about the people of Georgia. Also, when Donald Trump made the statement, how the U.S. create S-hole countries. When he calls a place an S-hole country, you got to remember it's the United States that was down with the whole thing. So Cynthia McKinney did an excellent job on bringing these books out. So you read about her, and she's a bad sister. We don't never want to forget Cynthia McKinney. Dr. Issa, he was on Blog Talk Radio, and he has a book, Blacklisted, The Price for Speaking Truth. Dr. Issa White is a PhD, and he was on Blog Talk Radio with Sister Filet, so I brought his book. And it's all over Amazon, and he talks about the price that people pay, the Dr. Benz, the Dr. Clarks, and what's going on. So big ups to Dr. Issa, and thank you for Sister Filet for having him on your program. Ayo Kamati, in his blockbuster 2 volume, Jews Are the Problem, and Jews Are the Problem Part 2, The Psychology of the Jew. We want to thank Ayo Kamati, Warn the Horizons, for this excellent, excellent publication and his 1-2 punch. Okay, the pandemic, then you might think it's over, but it's not. Capitalism on a Ventilator, and it talks about the massive amounts of money that people made. It also talks about the loans, the money that they gave out, and how everybody, millionaires was made every time you turned around on this book. So, Capitalism on a Ventilator. Also, my good friend, Dr. Scott Whitaker, in his book, Medicine, he's out of Georgia. And if anybody you should listen to, you should read his book, Medicine, The Causes and Solutions and Diseases to Malnutrition and the Medical Sins That Are Killing Us. Dr. Scott Whitaker's book is unbelievable. We have this book here, and it's also on Amazon, so you want to support Dr. Scott Whitaker and get his book. Also, I want to thank, and he was my man that I was going with the president, Robert Kennedy Jr. and the Children's Health Defense, The Truth About COVID, The Real Anthony Fauci, and The Wuhan Cover-Up. These are just 3 books by Children's Health Defense and Robert Kennedy, and I'm hoping that he could get in there with the Don and make some kind of changes on what's going on. So people, and you have to read the book. Also, I'm reading this book, and I just got it, The Medical Pharmaceutical Killing Machine, Finding Facts That Could Save Your Life. This is another book by Robert Kennedy in Children's Health Defense, and then we got Vax versus Unvax, Let the Science Speak, Robert Kennedy Jr. and Brian Hooker. So I'm hoping that now that he's in there, he's going to make a big impact. For some strange reason, everybody think COVID is over. Everybody think that everything's all right. Well, people are still catching heart attacks. People are still having myocarditis. People are still suffering. Huh?
Bloody nose. No.
People are still suffering. Bloody noses, waking up dead, family finding them. Well, Dr. Edward Dow, who used to work for BlackRock, he analyzed, and they was wondering how people was paying their premiums and getting along with life until a certain year came around. Now the insurance companies are paying out so, and they couldn't understand it. These are young athletes. These are young football players. These cats are young, and they're collapsing on the field, and Edward Dow has the data to see what's going on. Young football players, people swimming, and it's still happening. You're finding your loved ones gone and can't understand it. What happened? If you looked at the hearings, Rand Paul, and also down the CO-19 rabbit hole, independent scientists and the physicians unmasked the pandemic. So this is Deception. Excellent publications right here. So we have these books. You could get them on Amazon, and you read them and you understand. So you understand what's going on. And now I have the blockbuster. This is called the Pfizer Papers. And this is Pfizer's crime against humanity and everybody that participated in one of the biggest crimes against humanity. And it's a shame. Pfizer wanted to withhold this information for 75 years. But Naomi Wolf, Amy Kelly, and a whole bunch of people forced Pfizer to come up with the stuff that they didn't want to tell you. So the pictures is here. And this book is on Amazon, how the blood happens and everything from the shop. So this is an excellent book, forwarded by Stephen K. Brennan. And in April, they have another blockbuster publication that's coming out. And this is by War Room Books, Sky Horse Publication. And they have another book coming out. And it's called The Moderna Papers. So they are being forced to come up with the information so the listening public could understand what this crime against humanity. And now you still have people trying to run for political office and actually want the public to vote for them. It's a disgrace. So, ladies and gentlemen, I got some events, community events where you can look up and you can log on and get the information yourself. So let me check with the speaker. You on your way?
I'm outside.
Okay, doors open. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we have, these are events that's going on, and you're open to check out the information and log on to the programs. This is one of the hottest shows on the East Coast. This is Blog Talk Radio with Ted, Keisha, Brother Blacksmith, Sister Mama, Marcia, and they have another young lady that joined the team. So this comes on 8 o'clock every Thursday on Facebook Live. And Sister Keisha and Tad and Brother Black and Mama, they're getting it on. It's an excellent program. Our Philadelphia connection with Sister Empress Chi, Brother Lumumba, El Pollinator, Brother Blacksmith, myself. And we support Sister Filet, Blog Talk Radio. That comes on Saturday at 10 o'clock. And the number is 1319-527-6189. We want to thank our Philadelphia connection, Brother Moses, and everybody that comes on that program. So if you're not doing nothing on a Saturday night, get up on it and find out what's going on. Ayo Kamati, we want to thank Brother Anthony Mohammed and Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. Ayo Kamati, WSYP 95.1 FM out of Birmingham, Alabama. Ayo Kamati comes on from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. And you could call in Sankofa Revolutionary Radio, but also they give you a double header. We also have Dr. Haru with Herbal Results, and this gentleman is kicking up some medical information that's unbelievable. So we want to thank Anthony Mohammed and Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. That's the information on there is excellent. So thank you, Ayo Kamati, Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. Also, our brother out of Baltimore, Brother Darren Muhammad, State of the City. He comes on sometime Wednesday and Thursday, it all depends, but the blockbuster show for Darren Muhammad comes on Saturday at 12 o'clock on Instagram, State of the City, Baltimore, and Facebook Live. So we want to thank Darren Powerhouse Muhammad on his program. Big ups. Also, every Tuesday, Dr. Aline, your immunity project, that comes on at 3 o'clock and it's a rebroadcast at 7 o'clock. So Dr. Aline and comes on, and he comes on Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. So that program comes on every Tuesday at 3 o'clock. And it's a Zoom meeting, then it's a rebroadcast. So thank you, Dr. Aline, with the information he's getting. Our good friends at African Echoes, Brother Trust Graham, Brother True, and the gang, Brother Kareem, Brother Jagad, everybody that comes out of Newark, New Jersey, the African Echoes program that comes on 8 o'clock. Trust is the mediator of that group, and they are doing the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward a reclamation of the African mind. So we want to thank Trust, Brother True, and everybody. So they not only that, they give you another 1-2 punch on Saturday. The Know Thyself study group out of Asbury Park. That's Brother True and them too. Trust is the media of that group, and they are also doing the destruction of black civilization, Chancellor Williams. So they give you a 1-2 punch Friday night, and then you come back Saturday at 1:30. That information will be put in the chat because usually somebody comes on. The Semotap organization with Dr. Mack, Sister Richardine Theodore, and Betty Dobson, we want to thank y'all truly for the event. We went down to Madison Square Garden with to protest this disgusting cartoon Sigma of destroying the Good Times television series, and basketball great millionaire Steph Curry was involved in it, and probably a few of his other sports friends that make so much money. And the sad thing about it, you have to look at the Netflix series on Good Times and see how the media, and Netflix just disgusted, destroyed, disrespects us. And here you talking about some reparations? If we can't stop these Hollywood bums from destroying our image, what do you make you think they're going to give you nay quarter? They're going to keep coming up with the same nonsense. Another study. Netflix and Steph Curry, you got a thumbs down over here. So I don't care how many shots you can get in playing basketball. You're nothing. You take your money and you get out of here. So we want to thank the Semotap organization, and we even caught them down at the Barclays Center. And the sad thing about it is the fans, the people that stand in line, that pay all this money to see these $40 million slaves. They was not even aware. They was not even aware. They didn't know. So ladies and gentlemen, also, this Sunday, we have a big event with Brother Shabazz. It's $30 in advance, $40 at the door. That's Long Island College, Brooklyn campus. We got Infodici, we got Cabo Kamani, we got James Smalls, Mama Leah, Ella, and a host of speakers. This is going to be from 1:30 to 7 p.m. It's going to be a bad program. I'm definitely going to be there. So we want to thank the Magical Kemet and Brother Shabazz for this. The UNIA, never forget the UNIA. I was at the meeting and the UNIA is still going strong. So if you want to put yourself and go to The Rock, they have a big store, 13205 Merritt Boulevard, and there's so much stuff in this store. So I want to thank the UNIA and getting membership. So if you really want to get into an organization, join the UNIA in honor of Marcus Garvey. And I got a big calendar. I was with them, but I joined up. So I've been going to support them for a while, and then I finally joined up, but they gave a nice camera, a nice calendar with all kind of events. And if you really want to get some shopping going, you go down to the Rock or Merritt Boulevard. So we want to thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, these are just community events that's going on. You can view all of the B.K. William Mackey Jr. History Club lectures on YouTube under B.K. William Mackey Jr. You do the lecture, you study, and you get the information, and if you disagree with the speaker, you could always come to the Mackey's group and talk to the speaker firsthand if you have anything against him. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a person that Dr. Ben, one of the few people that's really following in the steps of Dr. Ben. And one thing about the Mackey's group, one of the main objects of the Mackey's group is to get the information on YouTube. We do the lecture and we get the information on YouTube. And he has been following the orders of Dr. Ben. I love him. He was writing a column in the Daily Challenge. He has a bunch of publications he's going to tell you about. He's a good friend of the Mackey's group, good friend of mine, and you can view his lectures on YouTube under B.K. William Mackey Jr. And this is just the start of the information that Dr. Monderson, because I've been to his house, and let me tell you, I thought Mackey had a lot of stuff. Well, this is just the start of his information that he's going to be doing lectures on Kemet in Egypt and the temples, so we could put it on YouTube and it'll go forever. And we also have the hard copy, just in case they want to shut everything down. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to give a great big hand to our good friend, Dr. Monderson.
Hey, Boo.
Hey, buddy.
Thank you.
Greetings, Dr. Monderson.
Yeah.
Hotel.
Hotel. Just give me a moment to settle. Good evening and hotel. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be in this space with these wonderful people, these great minds, the intellectual giants who feed our people with the right information. As you are aware, my name is Fred Monderson. Yeah, call me Doc Mons and all that good stuff. I mean, some of it is well-deserved, but nevertheless. Okay, so as they've said, we got a lot of things to do and a short time to get here. I'm here this evening to honor Dr. Joseph Antonio Alfredo Benjohanna, one of my mentors. And he's taught me a lot. I've learned from him. I've traveled with him. I've known him. I visited him in the nursing home. And I'm committed to doing much of what he taught me, which is fundamentally publish or perish. So the research that I do is designed to not make money, but to educate my people, and perhaps one day my legacy will bear fruit. Anyway, so to begin with, let me get my bicycle here so that I can start writing. Writing, not writing. I've got some ground rules that I want to establish before I begin. And first of all, as you know that this is Black History, Women's History Month, so I want to begin with, pardon me, but I've got two poems that I wanted to read to you because they're very apropos to this month. It'll take me another year before we get back here. So my first poem is called Black African Womanism. And I quote, dipped in chocolate, bronze in elegance, enameled with grace, toasted with beauty. My God, she's a black woman. Without you, African woman, African mother, there would have been no us, African fathers, sons, and daughters. Do we need to say any more African mothers, our own true goddesses? Let us praise you to the highest, telling the world about your righteousness. Let us tell the entire universe about your sacredness, African woman, Yosef A.A. Ben-Johanna. My poem, Black African Womanism, states, in this evening celebration of women, I give you the African woman, the black woman, blessed with beauty, charm, and wit, a unique specimen encapsulated in many experiences from being worshipped as goddess and queen mother, to enslaved household servant, revolutionary victim of racism, incarceration, sexually stereotyped, and so forth, to constantly cultivate the art of sexual politics, having been a victim of sex on demand by the slave master, his son, the overseer. She often boasts, I'm certainly not homogenized chocolate milk, but can dictate when and where I enter, all with stunning effect. Excelling as an intellectual, but more forcefully doubling as compassionate wife, mother, churchgoer, to entrepreneur, professional, even musician, and most important, too blessed to stress. Thus, it's easily recognized from time immemorial whether dead mesh Lucy or Eve. Particularly even the mythological goddesses, queens, and just plain folk. Today's circumstances demand educational activism, political practitioner, insightfulness, yet through it all, the African woman has demonstrated an illustrious history as pillar, symbol, motif, and individual of profound spiritual substance, resoluteness beyond the norm. Well-wielding power, supporting husband, family, or simply being loved and admired, the black woman has earned iconic status. Virtuous soul, champion standing is a magnificent work of art. Woman manifesting virtue and desires with a wonderful prize to capture. One wonderful prize to capture. To hold and to love. So much so in praising the African woman, Dr. Yosef Ben-Johanna, in admonishing the black man to love the black woman whom he placed upon a high plateau, reminded she has done what he can do. Given the obelisk is a small pyramid on a high base, this is where Dr. Ben placed the African black woman. Even Michael Jackson admonished, don't break young black girls' hearts. Inasmuch as Shu and Tefnut, who in the mythology, Shu separated Geb, the earth god, from sky goddess Nut, pregnant from the embrace to establish her body and legs as the four pillars supporting the construction of the heavens. In analyzing this remarkable phenomenon, Dr. Ben-Johanna went so far as to claim heaven is between a black woman's legs. After all, the goddess Nut, as depicted on the ceiling of a small kiosk within its own court in the temple of Dendera, her image not only shines rays on the temple, but shown giving birth to the sun in the morning. This manifesting power then sails across her heavenly body to be swallowed up at evening time. Having overcome the challenges of the nightly experience in the underworld, this phenomenon is repeated all over on the next morn. Creation in process with woman as dynamo in continuous rebirth is something only woman as divine personage can bring to fruition. Strange yet still, Nut, like the goddess Nephthys, Isis's companion and counterpart, the hardest working woman in the divinity business, mirrors the efforts of so many modern women. They get little or no credit for profound efforts, though they continue to perform nevertheless. Fast forward to these modern times. Cherise Prevail, my grandmother, that was the lady that was the Garveyite, was the first Pan-African internationalist activist in our family. Devoutly religious, and who would have been 127 years on the 22nd of January. So she would have been 130 years this January 225 past. January 19 being the holiest day in ancient Egypt, the day of the birth, and also I have a friend named Melinda Melbourne, her birthday. On March 6, 1957, and you are familiar with this, my mother, Monderson, dressed in the flag of the Ghanaian nation, advocated and celebrated its independence on Ghana Day. She too was a Pan-African internationalist of note and a woman of deep and enduring religious and spiritual conviction. Locally in Brooklyn, Crown Heights, Ruth Goring and her daughter Lois, as well as Elsie Richardson and Margaret Vincent, did much for their community, but sadly are not remembered in any meaningful way. In ancient Egypt, goddesses played a crucial role in the drama of heavenly experience. Queens sat in equality when exerting influence in matters of state, but more important in composition of the triad of husband, wife, and son. We had a Ra-Rat and Elder Horus, the Heliopolis triad. Isis, Osiris, and Horus, the Abydos triad. Seknet, Ptah, Nefertum, later Imhotep, Memphis triad. Satet and Akhet supported Khnum on Elephantine Island at Aswan. The Aswan Cataract area. At Karnak, Mut, Amun, and Khonsu, the Theban tribe. Among the queens, high standards of morality, creative thinking, and decision-making influenced events and developments of their day, all making their mark on the times. We hear of Teti Sheri, queen, mother, wife to a great warrior. Ahotep, queen, revolutionary, soldier, one who foiled a coup to save the throne for her progeny. Aramis Nefertari, queen, goddess with temple, ancestress, the most venerated person in Egyptian history. A tremendous symbol who blazed a trail to influence generations. Hatshepsut, queen, king, builder, woman wielding pharaonic power and creating long-lasting cultural innovations. Thi, wife of inequality, mother, power behind the throne. Nefertiti, wife, mother, partner in religious revolution. Nefertari, wife symbol with her own temple, beloved. These remarkable visionaries and symbols have all borne the mantle of African womanism with distinction and admirable excellence to be emulated. In Middle African history, Arabic travels reported the women of West Africa were free, friendly, and generous. A sort of Dionysian mentality prevailed in their behaviors, lifestyles, and surroundings. These same women were later marched through the door of no return to be forced to lay the foundation of chattel slavery in the new world of North and South America and the Caribbean. When Sonny Carson, the Brooklyn activist, repatriated his uncle, Samuel Carson, back to Ghana to open the door of return, and I was the chairman of that committee, he was buried alongside an enslaved African woman from Jamaica named Crystal. now resting beside him at a place in Ghana, West Africa called Monderson. Faced with challenges amid tragedy, Queen Nzinga fought Portuguese slave dealers, and equally the magnificent Yah Asantewaa led Ghanaian soldiers against British colonial machinations to free her beloved land. There is something about the soil of Ghana producing the remarkable Yah Asantewaa and the illustrious Kwame Nkrumah, the land where W.E.B. Du Bois chose to be buried and where Leonard Jeffries and James Smalls extolled to such great heights. Bottom Belly and Queen Mary rode with the Hill and Gully Riders in Jamaica, resisting colonial efforts, etching their names in Caribbean history. Phyllis Wheatley, the poet, demonstrated intellectual capabilities amidst the sorrowful experiences of chattel slavery, where all around slave farms and chattel coffles brought black women to slave marts to be examined in public by literous slave-owning businessmen. Sadly, Sally Hemings was unendingly victimized by Thomas Jefferson. You remember that story. Sojourner Truth advocated against the cruelty of slavery, and Harriet Tubman admirably ran a railroad, rescuing many to live free or die. Constance Baker Market championed African people in writing and actions amidst rampant American terrorism manifested after the long night of African captivity. Some determined this was actually 19th century American terrorism. Mary McLeod Bethune has educated the freed African mind, while Barbara Jordan fought redemption through political advocacy, and Sybil Williams and Gertrude resolutely supported John H. Clark and Joseph Ben Johannan as they spoke truth to power, uplifting the African and freeing his mind to challenge the might of the oppressor. NUMSA stood resolutely in revolutionary fervor beside the deep-thinking little giant Elombe Brown, who held high the symbol of Patrice Lumumba as Africa struggled to be free. What more can be said of Michelle Obama, the quintessential conjurer whose heritage chronicled the slave experience from the deep south, the slave coffles, and traveled from the plantation shack to the White House. For while her husband Barack Obama did business white, he came home to a wonderfully beautiful and loving black woman, ever mindful of her enslaved heritage. Even a significant, great intellect and blessedness were demonstrated after such the heinous and unspeakable tragedy in the magnanimity of spirit demonstrated in Mother Emanuel's forgiveness. But who could forget the recent Buffalo killings, of which black womanhood was again victimized? Thus, within the broader context, inasmuch as history has rightly sought to place African women in a better light, we need to further give credence to conditions of African women in the workforce, whether in terms of employment, promotion, salary, victims of sexual harassment, qualifications for job security, whether in government or in the private sector, in the broad and emerging and in board and emergency rooms, and especially in education, whether at the basic level or college, even the higher levels, particularly postgraduate research opportunities. Sustainable marriages, child rearing to create strong families oriented towards the future. The role of Negro organizations such as Delta Sigma Theta, Alpha Kappa Alpha, Dorothy Height and the National Council of Negro Women, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, the National Congress of Black Women, Sister Love, the National Women's Justice Initiative, and many more. People such as Ida B. Wells, a fierce champion who chronicled and fought against lynching, Fannie Lou Hamer, political champion demanding to be heard, Madam C.J. Walker, entrepreneur who paved the way for black women economic enterprise, Amy Jacks Garvey, inspirational pillar of support for her land and behind the Garvey movement. Marley Edgar Evans, wife, shot in assassination and forced to carry on. Coretta Scott King, icon in her own right, need I say more. Rosa Parks, tired but carried on to ignite the movement. Becky Shabazz, champion of the people, symbol and galvanizing force for nationalists and people of goodwill. Shirley Chisholm, boldly proclaimed, I am unbought and unbossed. Viola Plummer, revolutionary, long on the battlefield. Betty Dobson, tenacious revolutionary warrior woman. Adelaide Sackford, Queen Mother, intellectual giant and educational icon who relished in beloved. Michelle Obama, embodiment of charm, grace, intellect, fashionista, standing by her man and never forgetting ancestral heritage. Oprah Winfrey, woman for all seasons. Let us constantly remember, Frederick Douglass once said of a Negro or black woman, if by the heights from which they have come, rather than the heights to which those blessed with centuries of opportunities have attained, Negro women need not hang their heads in shame. Thus we have the profound cadre of black women of resolute and conscious determination, spiritual and philosophical humaneness, cultural and educational tenacity, intellectual fortitude and nobility of spirit, the quintessential dynamics engendering articulation, the highest standards and manifestations of African womanism, boldly looking to the future, resolutely standing to educate a people and nation to meet challenges whatever comes. All the while, constantly crystal stairs enabling African families to ascend to the greatest of heights. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That was my poem of Black African womanism in salute to black women and women in general this Black History Month. There is another poem I have to read, but I'll read it later. As I'm here to extol Dr. Ben Johannan, I found in the archives a poster of a tribute to Dr. Ben I did on May 23 in 2015 at Dr. Ben's house. My friend Dr. Lewis knows where that is. But it's one of the times when I spoke about let's liberate the temple. So this is, that's my poster for 2015. Of course, Queen Ames Nefertari, the most venerated woman in ancient Egypt, mother of Amenhotep, wife of Ames I, mother of Amenhotep I, and both mother and son were deified and had their own temple on the west bank of Thebes. Like I said, there are some things that I have to, some ground rules I have to establish. So, pardon me, I'm getting there. Okay. So, I've often spoken about when I was at Temple University and they refused to give me a doctorate, matriculate me in the program. The chairman of the department, Dr. Malefia Sante, refused to admit me because according to them, you know more than the professor. Well, he wrote me this 5-word letter. Well done, Monderson. Malefi Asante, because I wrote the African-centric response to the invasion of Somalia when the United States went after General Adid. They failed, and we had a movie called Black Hawk Down. So I wrote sort of the prescript to that movie. I've always remained committed to what Dr. Ben admonished me to do. So back in 1997, I did this presentation at Reverend Sharpton's place, the House of Justice. It's called Egyptologist Discusses the Origin of Man in Africa. So I want to get those out of the way. And I'm often, I don't want to use the word disillusioned, but I'm saddened because Barere makes a special effort to educate his audience about the books that he has found. And I really haven't seen too many people running out there and buying those books. And but practically every book that Dr. Ben wrote. This is his We the Black Jews. And if you notice right here, he autographed this book to me. So We the Black Jews, Dr. Ben. We were there in the bicentennial period when he wrote this on Tutankhamun. When I supported him and he wrote his Black Theology, Black Seminarians and Black Theology, Black Clergy without a Black Theology. These are all been signed. Unfortunately, I didn't catch him to endorse this one, but it's African Nile Valley People, Culture, and History. And of course, when I was in Egypt with Dr. Lewis in 1989, when he just put out this one called Abu Simbel Tegiza, a manual and guidebook, and this too is also signed because as I bought the books in support of his effort, I had tried to get him to sign it. Talk about effort. I gotta praise Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis, the guy that sits here sometimes, because he and Mrs. Lewis often held these dinners in Harlem at the Mini Sink, where he was trying to raise funds so that Dr. Ben can do archaeological digs at Elephantine Island in Aswan, where he believed the origins of Egypt actually manifested itself. Okay, so kudos to Dr. Lewis for that. You must be aware that the nation's in crisis over reading. About a month and a half, the New York Times did an expose saying that the city of New York, the Board of Education, was spending $36,293 per student, and reading was down, and so too was math, MATH. This past Martin Luther King Day, I was involved in a march. Dr. McIntosh was also there, and the assemblywoman said that reading had fallen some 60%, 66%. What are they doing about it? Very little. I've tried to reach out to a number of people, telling them about my creation of a 12-volume reading strategy entitled "Empower Your Child's Reading and Empower Your Child's Reading and Knowledge Through Black History Exercises." This is the first volume. All 12 of them have the same cover, essentially. This is the book 2 of the 12-volume set, and book 2 deals with ancient Egypt. Book 3 also deals with Ancient Egypt Part 2. But Ray will put these on blast in a minute or so. And there's the rest of them are of the same caliber, quality of Africa from ancient to modern times, particularly the 19th century, Middle East, Africa, Sudanic history, and things of that nature. And what I've done was that I created this reading strategy utilizing some nearly 2.5 dozen reading features that the young student needs to know. And if you will notice this book here, each chapter, here comes Barrera, so let me get these on blast. This is the first volume of the 12-volume set. This is book 2. This is book 3. And what I'm trying to do here is I begin each chapter with the alphabet of ancient Egypt, trying to get young people to start writing their names in hieroglyphics and write simple sentences. And then I have what is called, I begin with two discovery questions, and I end with 2 discussion questions. And within I have a tremendous number of vocabulary divided into syllabication and parts of speech, and I try to go through all of the reading features that the young student needs to know so be empowered to create what we call intellectual autonomy. So this is my contribution to the reading dilemma that the nation faces, and I would implore my people to help me to spread the word about the reading strategy designed to create intellectual autonomy among our people. I often mention the confusion that we have as to who in fact were the ancient Egyptians and where it came from. And I would submit to you today, my friends, that the right-thinking people of Europe and America knows the facts, but purposely present false information. Okay, there was a French Egyptologist, Georges Foucault, at the start of the 19th century, who said the early Egyptologists made mistakes. Dr. Leonard James, my principal mentor, he said those mistakes were purposeful. But nobody is seeking to correct those mistakes, so we are regurgitating, we're consuming the regurgitated falsity that Dr. Chika Diop spoke about, falsity, the falsification of history. So this is my, who were the ancient Egyptians? You familiar with this work? This is an important work. It's important, a work for departure. Right? I got a lot of new useful information in this work here. So, the purpose of my being here this evening is to extol the efforts of Dr. Yosef Ben Johanan. And one of the principal things that he taught us was, man, know thyself. I'm speaking this evening on the Greco-Roman experience. So let's go. Let's begin. So there has been but 4 instances, perhaps more, where good and bad, or right and wrong, collided in ancient Egypt, even in modern times, and both parties ended up being satisfied. The first dealt with Psammiticus. He was a 26th dynasty pharaoh who was confronted with expanding Greek influence and seizure of his territory, of his country. That is to say, Greek expansion in Egypt first through Mediterranean trade and then other aspects of skullduggery, such began to affect the body politic of Egypt. In a stroke of diplomatic genius, the king agreed to offer the Greeks the city of Naucratis to conduct their business, requiring they move all activity within the limits of that city, and so confining them to that one location. In this way, the Egyptians were able to control, to some extent, the initial Greek disregard for Egyptian culture and territorial integrity. And so, if you will, out of that evil came good. The second instance is when the Greek philosopher Aristotle, to whom much negativity, such as intellectual dishonesty, pillaging, seizure of Egyptian knowledge, and subsequent misrepresentation of ownership, has been assigned, but not generally known. Okay? As such, in his book Physio-Almonica, in his search for the logical mean, that is to say, the middle ground, the ideal type of human being, he thought highly of his fellow Greeks. In this regard, he argued, the Egyptians and the Ethiopians are cowards because they are black. Well, he was wrong on the whole notion of cowardice on the part of both peoples, especially given the many wars Africans have fought all across the globe. However, in this weird revelation, the great philosopher did identify both people as being black. So he was right and wrong at the same time and on the same issue. A third instance occurred in Greco-Roman conquest of Egypt from 332 BC to 30 BC. For these rulers aspired to the cosmic divine beliefs and practices of the Egyptians. So the priesthood, the last defenders of the religious, moral, and cultural tradition, essentially or purportedly offered, we will make you gods, as we have done with our leaders for millennia, but you must agree to build temples to be worshipped therein. Remember that man insisted that we free the temple. So this is what I'm doing. Thus, Greco-Roman temples were built, but by Egyptian and Nubian architects and under Egyptian priestly supervisors, though influenced through Greco-Roman overlordship because they are the conquerors, in which some new features were also introduced. And so, in this new intellectual dispensation, architectural dispensation, pardon me, the temples were now illustrated from top to bottom more than in ancient structures, yet and thereby preserving much of the early ritual and motifs. A fourth instance is provided by the revered Dr. John Henry Clark in assessing Booker T. Washington's Atlanta Exposition speech. Realizing the full potentialities of his message, in an off-the-cuff remark, Dr. Clark jokingly remarked, Booker T did a little talking, but more important, he built and bequeathed an effectively vibrant and functioning Tuskegee Institute that a century later is still educating and uplifting black men and women in a multitude of artistic, craft, and professional disciplines. Now, that third example of Aristotle, as provided in similar fashion, good out of evil, for the priests of Egypt under Greco-Roman domination were able to inveigle their overlords to build the Greek and Roman temples, enabling them to accumulate the whole corpus of ancient knowledge that ended up being preserved for later appreciation, study, and enlightenment. Thus, here then is the most profound example of good out of bad, or good out of evil. Notwithstanding these underlying circumstances, as George G.M. James laid it down in his book Stolen Legacy, the Philosophical Library in 1954, Dr. Brett had some things to say about what happened to him when he led the capital to the bag, of which several prints were made of this wonderful and revealing source of research. In this, as the author put it, as I stated. He put the meat on the falsely constructed bones in the statement, which essentially requires a moral, intellectual, social, redirectional focus, not simply for Africa, black people, but the world in general. For as Casey Hayward of Ghana, West Africa, advised just after the discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, he said, people in general must become more humane and turn from a world that has become materialistic, aggressive, coldly mechanical, greedy, false in their thinking, too scientific, and moving humanity towards the brink of extinction. For very early, Professor G.M. James pointed to the roots of this cancerous intellectual and moral malady infecting modern man, essentially Western man, in the lengthy train of covetousness that shaped his academic, social, and philosophic outlook on life. This which Professor James eloquently argued. He said, in the drama of Greek philosophy, there are three actors who play distinct parts, namely Alexander the Great, who by an act of aggression invaded Egypt in 333 BC, and ransacked and looted the royal library of Alexandria, and together with his companions carried off a booty of scientific, philosophic, and religious books. Egypt was then stolen and annexed as a portion of Alexander's empire, but invasion plan included more than territorial expansion, for it prepared the way for and made it possible for the capture of the culture of the African continent. This brings us to the second actor, that is the school of Aristotle, whose students moved from Athens to Alexandria to Egypt and converted the royal library, first into a research center and secondary a university, and thirdly compiled that vast body of scientific knowledge which they had gained from research, together with the oral instruction which the Greek students had received from the Egyptian priests into what they call the history of Greek philosophy. In this way, the Greeks stole the legacy of the African continent and called it their own. And as has been already pointed out, the result of this dishonesty has been, I finished quoting you, the result has been the creation of an erroneous world opinion that the African continent did not create civilization as we know it. The good professor continued saying, and now we come to the third actor, and that is ancient Rome, who through the ethics of her emperors Theodosius in the 4th century AD and Justinian in the 6th century AD abolished the mysteries of the African continent. That is the ancient culture system of the world. The high metaphysical doctrines of these mysteries could not be comprehended. The spiritual power of the priests were unsurpassed. The magic of the rites and the ceremonies filled the people with awe. Egypt was the holy land of the ancient world, and the mysteries were the one ancient holy Catholic religion whose power was supreme. This lofty culture system of the black people filled Rome with envy, and consequently she legalized Christianity, which she had persecuted for 5 long centuries, and set it up as a state religion and as a rival to the mysteries in its own mother. So the mother of Christianity, he's saying, was Egypt. This is why the mysteries have been despised. This is why other ancient religions of the black people are despised, because they are all offspring of the African mysteries, which have never been clearly understood by Europeans and consequently have evoked their prejudice and condemnation. In keeping with the plan of Emperors Theodosius and Justinian to exterminate and forever suppress the culture system of the African continent, the Christian Church established its missionary enterprise to fight against what it calls paganism. Consequently, missionaries and educators have gone to the nation field with a superiority complex, born of miseducation and disrespect. A prejudice has made it impossible for them to accomplish the blessings which missionary enterprise might always have accomplished. So in that sense, they failed in their objective. For this reason, missionary enterprise has been responsible for a positive injury against African people, which consists of the perpetual caricature of African culture in literature and exhibitions which provoke laughter and disrespect. That is why, and the fruit of that philosophic and cultural accomplishment, the Africans of Egypt were able to lift the spirits, cultural outlook, and consciousness of their people and others who benefit from the not easily learned scientific basis of knowledge. Much of this has been experimental trial and error methods over thousands of years. But let me remind you, those seeking this knowledge, Dr. Ben always insisted his students pay attention to the architectural features of the temple. That is why, and most important, at the entrance of practically every Egyptian temple, young initiates were instructed, man, know thyself. That is why an important realization with consequences has been apropos to the fact when the Greeks invaded Egypt, an Egyptian priest was purported to have said, and to think we taught the Greeks all they know. How disappointing, sort of biting the hand that fed you. Okay, so, well, as I said, I'm here to edify you to some extent about some features of the temple. Dr. Ben again reminded us we must liberate, free the temple. Some people say, well, you mean don't pay to go in. No, and try to understand what it is that you're looking at. And be wary of people who carry you to Egypt, because they may have ulterior motives, right? If you're going there, it's not about just taking a few photographs. Take some time to seek to understand what it is that you're looking at. Read some literature before you get there, so you will have some kind of interaction and understanding what it is that the educational experience is all about. Nevertheless, and to reinforce today's presentation in honor of Dr. Yosef Ben Johanan, we must never let Dr. Ben be forgotten. We have almost forgotten Malcolm X. These heroes must remain constantly in our consciousness. I remember when this young lady asked Dr. Ben, Dr. Ben, I never heard of Malcolm X. He said, well, it wasn't really the 10th, it was X. And then we have, again, along with brother, Dr. Clark, Professor Simmons, George Simmons, G2 Wilson, Malcolm X, and a whole host of others who have laid the foundation for where we are today. If these people were to come back today, one of these singers was a dancer with his father, I don't remember his name, but he said, he prayed to the Lord, he said, oh, you don't do this too often, but can you bring him back? So can he bring these people back? I've written some poems about, especially Sonny, when he got to the pearly gates and confronted St. Peter, but that's another matter. Okay, so, firstly, I'm focusing on this architectural Greco-Roman temple experience, which is today's lecture title. Erected at such places as Dendera, sometimes spelled D-E-N-D-E-R-A or D-E-N-D-A-R-A, and we got to pay attention to the fact that modern scholarship uses ancient Greek names to describe Egyptian personalities that were in existence thousands of years before that. In this respect, the culprit was Dr. Cephalus Petrie. So he started using these Greek names to describe these early Africans, and then modern scholarship picked it up and continue to this day. So the world as we know it is full of falsity. Don't forget that Dr. Chikati Diop wrote about the modern falsification of history. And then that is why, again, you got to trust your serious researchers who out there doing the work and bringing it to you. Not insisting that, quote unquote, you do the research. My job is to do the research. If I do the proper research, you don't have to do the research. Okay? So don't be fooled about all of that nonsense. Okay. So Deborah was the site of goddess Hathor worship. Edfu, god Horus. The twin temples of Kamambo, the elder Horus and the crocodile god Sobek. When we said elder, there were two Horuses. There was elder Horus was a brother of Osiris, the older brother of Osiris. The younger Horus was the son of Osiris and Isis. Esna, the home of the god Khnum, his principal home was Elephantine, again to the southern border of Egypt. But he had a temple at Esna. He's the guy who made man on his potter's wheel, using clay one, Egyptian clay. Now, you can go in another direction and try to make some connection between man being made and molded through clay, and then come up with your own conclusion. In that respect, I'm not dealing with that. And Philae, where goddess Isis was worshipped. As previously stated, these were somewhat misnomer in that they were built, these temples, they were built during Greek and Roman conquest and incorporation, but by Egyptian and Nubian builders, architects, all managed by an Egyptian priesthood, but nevertheless under Greek and Roman administration and supervision. But they were still able to put on old master, if you know what I mean, right? In such concerns, Byron Schaeffer, in his book, Temples of Ancient Egypt, 1985, 1997, 2005, page 186, he pointed out that temples of the Ptolemaic and Roman period are the product of a temple building program of large scale, probably initiated by the Egyptian clergy, the priesthood. All over Egypt, numbers of temples were built or rebuilt or expanded. These were the temples of Hathor and Deborah, we'll come to her, Khnum at Esna, Horus at Edfu, Sobek and Horus at Kamambo, even Isis at Philae. Built during the reigns of the Ptolemies, their decorations were augmented during Roman times. So essentially, the Greeks built the temples, but the Romans decorated these temples. And this is the reason why in most of these temples, the cartouches that enclose the name of the king, or sometimes blanks, because they weren't sure who is going to be the next king. They were really done and contained Roman emperors' names. As such, the Greek association with and through Egyptian corporation can be viewed within the symbolism of today's standing temples. For such interaction were influential across the great swath of Greek cultural interaction and attainment in Egypt. That is, within religion, the gods, science, literature, much of which survived and credited to Greece and Rome, was transmitted through Egyptian papyrus and teachings. Much more important, while modern man seeks to have overplayed the significance of the Greek attainment, the roots of such glory, whether through misinformation, disinformation, distortions of or omission purposes, we need to heed the perspective of George Sarton. I mentioned his name in one of my earlier lectures. And he had about 1,500 pieces. Petrie had 1,200, and I sought to get up there with these guys. And I stopped counting after maybe 1,100. I'm working on it. George Sarton said he was the celebrated editor of Isis magazine fame. And he said, the great miracle was an Egyptian makeover. It wasn't an original creation. Further elaborate an even more architectural contradiction in this age, Schaeffer continued. Among the smaller edifices are temples like the one consecrated to Hathor and Mart Adera Medina on the west bank of Thebes, where the Old Kingdom sage Imhotep and the New Kingdom sage also Amenhotep, son of Hapu, he was a great architect. He built the temple of Luxor, and he built the processional colonnades in Luxor and Karnak, and he built the temple of Solab in Nubia, and he built the temple of Sadiqa, all for Amenhotep III. He was the son of Thutmose IV. And a little tidbit on the side, the kings of the first kings of the 18th dynasty, we have Ahmose, Amenhotep I, Thutmose I, Thutmose II, Thutmose III, Amenhotep II, Thutmose IV, Amenhotep III, Amenhotep IV, Tutankhamun, Horemheb, and he handed over to Ramses I, Seti I, Ramses II, Merneptah, and so forth. Okay. That Montu at Metamud, this guy promised to let me into Metamud. At this time when I'm going back in May, I'm going to call him to the table. There are some temples that you can't get into because they're under construction, right? I was in Temple Mut. It's up to here on the ground, right? I was able to get in there because Mr. Mansour was in charge and let me in, and Metamud. Nobody goes there, but stuff like that. But hopefully I go there to get my images, for my books. Mention must also be made of the temples of Isis at Aswan, Philae. I'm going to Daboud. Daboud was Dr. Ben's village. Daboud. They were going from Luxor to Aswan, and the bus broke down. Dr. Lewis may know about this. The bus broke down and near the village of Daboud, and the Daboudians, they never seen black people. They're black, but like American black. So they came out because they were standing in the sun, and they came out with water and this and that. So right then, Dr. Ben adopted Daboud. In the construction, okay, there was a low dam built by the British in 1902. But by the 1960s, with the expansion of Egypt, population-wise and stuff like that, they built the high dam. And the creation of the high dam on Lake Nasser meant that a lot of the ancient Nubian culture, temples, burials, and things of this nature were inundated by the new Lake Nasser. So a number of the villages were dispersed to different areas, and Daboud became a center of the opposition to the dispersion of the Nubian culture. People like Farouk and Abu Nava, they would say the dam down, because the dam displaced their So what Dr. Ben would do every time he went to Egypt, he would stop at Daboud and he would ask his followers coming from America to bring different things to give to the village, and the village as a site of resistance, that's the word I was looking for. The village would now distribute whatever, children, books, pencils, and medicine, and he said, don't bring used clothing, bring new stuff and what have you. And then he make a collection on whatever was collected from the group. The interesting thing is that Dr. Ben never wanted anybody to pay for anything when they got to Egypt. Don't worry what these guys say passing the hat. Let me tell you about passing the hat too. Okay? Whatever was collected, he equaled that, and sometimes he doubled it, and he gave it to the mayor of the village, and he distributed to the disparate groups. That is one of the reasons why Dr. Ben was so hated in Egypt, because he was feeding the resistance, the Nubian resistance, and the foreign conquerors, in this case the Arabics, who had taken over from as early as 640 AD. Now, I think it must have been 1990. I was in Egypt, part of a group, and there's a gentleman from the United States. I never really had much to do with him from that time onward. He sent me on the bus, wanted to go on the bus and collect some money so we can give the baggage handlers. Young and impressionable but still foolish, I went on the bus, collected the money and gave it to him. Dr. Ben was upset. So Dr. Ben flew in from Aswan to Cairo, and blazed him up because he had given him $1,000. Alright? Given the person $1,000 and said, listen, you handle all the dynamics because I wasn't there. So again, be wise, get wise, Mac. Okay? There's scams or everybody's a scam, but trust me, I'm on your side. Okay, so the Greek maker was an Egyptian makeover, right? So, okay. So these temples visited within the current tourist circuit in Egypt must be seen within the whole gambit of the Greek-Egyptian interacting experience. This much was a carryover into the Roman period that followed foreign control over Egypt. Now, seeking to understand the foundation upon which these later holy places were constructed, as an example, the Temple of Dendra was built during the Greco-Roman period. I said that. Like so many others, while the planning of the temple took 20 years to lay out, the actual construction took 185 years. And so this is why, though the erection was essentially Greek, the decoration is generally credited to Roman emperors. Again, as such, in the case of Dendra Temple, its antecedents go back to far antiquity, in that evidence of Thutmose III of the 18th dynasty was associated with this temple. And Pepi I of the 6th dynasty was also associated with Dendra. So a number of holy sites are often built one on top of the other. Okay, why I say that, so this old kingdom are found associated with the site, the temple, the literary history, making the subject of building and rebuilding over an expansive period of time. Notwithstanding, this realization is not far-fetched, for nevertheless, a temple dedicated to Hathor may be as old as Ra himself, for this goddess is featured in the myth of the destruction of humanity. She was Ra's henchman, right? Henchwoman, I should say. In that the experiment to wipe out humanity, actually what happened was that Ra started to get old and dribble. He would dribble, and people started to laugh at him, and he was angry, and he sent Hathor as a lion goddess. No one remember the segment to destroy humanity. And then he had second thoughts, so he had to stop her. So what he did was he got some wine and some blood and mixed it up and fed it to her. She got drunk and she forgot what she was doing, and so he was able to save humanity. So she was his henchwoman, simply because humanity ridiculed the old ruler and he sought revenge. In subsequent victimization of Ra, Hathor had her scorpions bite the old man in her quest to have him reveal his secret name. You know, when you know the name of a person, you have sort of leverage over. It's different to when somebody named you. You remember in Roots when the guy kept trying to name Haley's ancestor, calling him Toby. He said, no, my name is Kunti Kinte. Right? And we got these guys today that relish in being named such and such. Right? So she challenged him, unless you tell me your secret name, I'm not going to hear you. He told her what his secret name was, and she used her magic to extract the poison from him. No less significant, her visible presence on the Nama palette at the establishment of Egyptian kingship and commencement of the dynastic period is noteworthy, and as such, this prominence forces all to recognize Hathor as a force to contend with. Therefore, Hathor's Greco-Roman temple should be seen not as a new, but an ancient heritage. Withstanding challenges of time and man, yet transmitting ancient, sacred, and metaphysical knowledge from a site of revered architectural magnificence, the Temple of Denver, the influence and significance of Goddess Hathor and her temple at Denver must always remain prominent in our recognition and understanding of Egyptian religion and its imprint on African religious practice. Of equally particular note, by all kingdom. Okay, so we first see Hathor on the Nama palette at the beginning of dynastic rule. However, we don't know where in fact Nama came from. We know he's on the sea, right? And we know that he sailed north. Some say he sailed from Abydos. Dr. Diop said he was Nubian. And if we look at the 17th dynasty, Flinders Petrie again, sometimes these guys like to carry the bag. He said the 17th dynasty coming from Nubia held Thebes as its capital. These are the guys who expelled the Hyksos conquerors, and they founded the new kingdom, the 18th dynasty. The 17th dynasty and the 18th dynasty is actually the same dynasty. But Manito, who created the dynasty, listing of the dynasties, because this was a historical epoch where the 17th dynasty actually kicked out the ended Hyksos rule. It should have been a continuation. He replaced it with a new dynasty, but it's the same people, because Ahmes I founded the 18th dynasty, but he was the grandson of Sekenenre. We have Sekenenre Tau, we have Kamos, and then Amos. So all of these were. Okay, so yeah. We see Hathor at Karnak on Nama's palette. But there were people outside of Egypt, in the desert and further south, who were unknown to the Egyptians. And they were worshiping Hathor. Okay, so we ask, where does she come from? Where does Nama come from? Okay, in Black Genesis, Bowal and Brophy speak of the people of Naphtali, who between 20,000 and 3,500 were practicing agriculture, were practicing, had religious practices. They were moving large stones to create structures, architectural structures. They kept cow, they kept what is called the cow culture. They were worshiping the cow as a mother goddess. These people are known to the Egyptians. Toby Wilkinson found evidence in the eastern desert, not the western desert. And he shows how the eastern and the western desert coalesce in the Nile Valley, and they cross the river and they communicated with each other. And he's saying that civilization didn't actually begin in the Nile Valley, but civilization began in the harsh realities of the desert. And there, at that time, in over 20 to 10,000 BC, that area, much of the area of the desert of the Sahara was watered, and it enabled cow culture to manifest itself. Cow culture meaning keeping cows not for the meat, but for the blood. And if the cow died, you use the skin for clothing and what have you. And navigation using heavenly observation. So astronomy actually began in the western desert among the people who migrated. As the desert began to desiccate, they moved into the Nile Valley, and then they became the ancestors or the precursors to the Egyptians. These guys know that, but they're not teaching that. And they don't want you to know that because you only need to know basis and you don't need to know. But that's our job. Then say, and today, he says, search the truth and expose it. So that's what we do it. Expose these holy men, that's what they did. They exposed the truth. And this is, when you know who you are, man, know yourself, then you can stand against all kinds of forces, right? Okay. So she had many names, right? So according to Jill Camille in Upper Egypt and Nubia, she said that in Memphis her name was the Lady of the South Sycamore, that famous tree that was a part of the afterlife. In Punt, where the Egyptians came from, actually where they came from is really where when they approach the ocean. But they were between the Nile and the ocean is where they actually began, or as Dr. Penn would say, the headwaters of the Nile. Okay, so some went. Our church ward says that they navigated down the Nile. People like Dr. Ben say that they went east, and they ended up on the coast, where in the modern Somali, Eritrea area. And today, those people call people of front, and they're said to be quote unquote, they weren't the Africans, they were in fact the originators of the ancestors. You gotta parse some of the misinformation. So in Memphis she was the Lady of the South Sycamore. In Punt she was a mistress of Punt. In Sinai she was mistress of Methken. And in Phoenicia she was the Lady of Byblos. She was associated with pleasure, motherhood and beauty. She is seen nursing or giving succor to the pharaoh. Sometimes you see, and especially at Hatshepsut temple, they're worrying, she's sucking the udders of the cow, who was a manifestation of the goddess Hathor. And when you see the mother nursing the child, is a personification of, again, Hathor giving sustenance to whether the king or whomever, or a child. I spoke about the... so let us not forget, Hathor is a transformative goddess, and as such, as in the destruction of mankind, she was a lion goddess. In our cases, she doubles as Mut, the mother on Isis, and also mother and faithful wife. What is interesting, how Isis worshipped after long consolidation in Egypt, migrated to Rome, and took on a significant role, rivaling Christianity in the early years of the emergence of this religion. That's why the emperors Theodosius and Justinian closed the temples and established Christianity as a state religion. I mean, they were killing the Christians for centuries, but now they say, well, we need a bulwark against the mysteries of Egypt, so let us put forward and embellish Christianity as a opposition. So this particular image is significant for why she is the fifth. Okay, so we see her in several places, and a place of note. I'm not really supposed to let you know this too early, but I'm finishing up a work on the Temple of Luxor. The Temple of Luxor, there's no building on the face of the earth that corresponds to the Temple of Luxor. It was the first Grand Lodge, the center of Egyptian learning that was rebuilt on Amenhotep III. He was the father of the son of Thutmose IV and the father of Akhenaten, who started his own religious worship. They like to say that he was a heretic. He wasn't a heretic. The word heretic is a later Johnny come lately. He was a revolutionary, not a heretic. So the Temple of Luxor is the grinding stone of the Masonic order. What is interesting, how ISIS worship took consolidation. So this particular image is significant why she is the fifth cow in the Ascent of the Princes. Okay, so the Temple of Luxor was built principally by Amenhotep III. And then it was extended under Ramses II 100 years later. Suala de Labis, the symbolist, said that the temple was actually planned in the beginning. Only that the Pharaoh Amenhotep was not able to complete his temple. Right? He got as far as the processional colonnade and what is today considered the second pylon. Ramses II came in and extended that and even expropriated some of the statues that he had placed there. But in that, what is called the Ramesian front, right, there is what is called the ascent of, there is an image showing the front of the Temple of Luxor. And there is a procession to the front to the Temple of Luxor in which the sons of Ramses II is shown as visiting the temple. And you see the front of the temple with 4 standing statues, 2 seated statues, the 2 obelisks, and the decorated facade. In that procession, a number of cows, sacrificial animals, are being marched behind the princes. And the 5th cow in that procession depicts a Nubian lady coming out of the head of the cow. So Hathor, as a cow goddess, is in that procession, just as she was on Nama's palette at the beginning of history. A lot of people, a lot of writers, they talk about the brand on the haunch of the cow, that particular cow, but nobody talks about the Nubian lady. They talk about the decoration of the horns of the cow with golden rings, if you will. Nobody talks about that. They talk about the feet of the cow because these were sacred cows, sort of lazy cows. They weren't they were cows for sacrifice, so they didn't get exercise. So you can see how their hoofs were torn upward. Even today, the guides may show you the facade to the temple, but nobody ever looks at or talks about. I know there's several times when I sit there in the shade and I look and I see these people pass. Nobody. So Hathor was well recognized by Ramses II. So when we talk about the temple of Dendera, where the goddess was worshipped, we have to understand that Hathor was a significant deity in ancient Egyptian culture. And her ideas were transmitted down through the dynasties and ended up at the temple of Isis at Philae, at Smyrna. So, the temple of Dendera is oriented north to south. Right? North to south, that is to say, somehow or the other, a lot of the religious structures are oriented towards Karnak, which is at Karnak temple in Thebes. So north to south means that they're looking at Karnak, whose axis runs from east to west. So the temple, in some respects, is a mirror image of the other late period temples. And these temples that we're talking about are, which I'm coming to in a moment, Temple Hathor and Dendera, the Temple of Horus and Edfu, the Temple of Komombo, Elder Horus and Sobek, the Temple of Esna with Kanu, the Temple of Isis and Philae. All of them have the same general layout that mirrors a concept of protecting the sanctuary where the god lay. Okay. For example, from a distance, we say that that temple is the sanctuary of a particular god. But when you get within the confines of that temple, there is a building which is actually the sanctuary, which is the most sacred spot in the temple, and that's where the god resides, and that's where the daily ritual is practiced by the king or his representative, and all offerings are made in the name of the king because only he can communicate with the god, or the dispensation that he would give to the high priest and anybody who's helping him but the average person never gets that close within that small radius. Okay. No. So the temples have special features such as the screen wall. Okay, so Jan Assmann, in Search for God in Ancient, what's his title? It's the title here. Yeah, I have it somewhere. Anyway, he compares the sanctuary and the divinity within with a nuclear reactor. Right? With the nuclear reactor that emits energy, you have to protect the people on the outside. The sanctuary where the god resides, you have to protect it from the contamination of the people on the outside. So we have these walls or these partitions, right? Take for example Karnak, which is a famous temple, right? It had a super exterior wall. It has where several temples are located, and it has the principal temple of god Amun called Karnak. Within Karnak, there is what is called, if you will, Ramses the Second's girdle wall. Then there's another wall of Tutmosis IV. Then there is the wall of the temple of the sanctuary, and then there's the room the wall of the room where the nails or the god resides. So all of these things here is a way of protecting the divine essence that's in the sanctuary. And this is different to similar to, but different from the nuclear reactor that emits its energy outward, and the sanctuary to protect from contamination from the outside. Much has been written about the cosmological significance of temples during the later period of Egyptian history, making it the best known of all aspects and functions. We can therefore limit ourselves to a brief summary of the most important facts. Essentially, the floor of these later temples represented the earth, and the ceiling, the sky. Columns took the form of plants rising from the earth, and the dados on the walls were decorated with marsh plants, the decoration here, or with processions going to the temple and going to the sanctuary. The personifications of unfruitfulness that face the inner part of the temple, that bear offerings, food, incense, musicians, you have instrumental, you have choral music, you have dancers, merrymakers, people carrying clothing, people carrying food, carrying water, and different things. As the sky, the ceiling were decorated with stars with astronomical representation. Between the floor and the ceiling, between earth and sky stretched the decoration on the walls with their endless colored scenes, filling the stony cosmos in effigy with action and life. In the semantics of an Egyptian temple, there is a contradiction that is probably based in the structure of the sacred. Viewed from the outside, the temple is a highly protected area, an enclave of the sacred in a profane world, a tightly sealed vessel resident on its very spot. But viewed from within, the vessel of holiness separated from the world is itself the entire world. So the temple is the world, but the temple is the world in the wider world. The temple represents a cosmos beyond which there is nothing more. The cult image filled the temple with an emanation of divine presence, while at the same time the God filled the entire cosmos with the radiance of his magnificence. The symbolism of Egyptian temples rests on this antinomy between interior and exterior. What's inside, what's outside. The naos, which is is generally like a stone structure, and within that stone structure, so it's like a house within the sanctuary, and in which a smaller image of God resides. So there's a door to that, there's a door to the sanctuary, there's a door outside. So the Pharaoh goes in, opens the door, the sealed door. The night before, when you put God to rest, you know, the God gets 3 meals a day. In the morning, he gets a luncheon meal, and he gets a light snack in the evening. Then you tell him to go to bed, and you wake him in the morning, and then this you repeat them. So when the Pharaoh visits and he opens the door, he has to, when he leaves at night, he seals the door, and he puts like a stamp on it, so that when he comes in the morning, he knows nobody went in there to disturb the God. He opens that, and he goes into the next room, and his man who's following him is incensing or asperging, as they would call it, and driving away all forms of evil, sacralizing the environment so that he can now communicate with his father, the deity, and you know, I mentioned before one of my guides had taken me to this temple at El Kab in the desert. And the guy opened the door, and before I could go in, my guide said, "Hold on, let me go in." When he went in, he said, "Hotep," and right there at the door was a kneeling figure. So by announcing to that spiritual essence within that enclosure, you're now able to move in without being I don't know how to say it. You know, you don't come into my house without saying good morning. Right? So when he goes in there, he has something to say to the divine person. Good morning, Your Majesty, or my Lord, whatever. And his man is doing the inserts, you know, with how they do it. And he said, I'm here to do my job. I'm here to take care of you. I'm here to do the ritual. And you have to give me permission to put my hands on you so I can change your clothes, wash you up, and feed him. And he steps out, closes the door. Of course, when he's leaving. Generally, in the area surrounding the nails, there's nothing but sand, and there's sufficient space so that when it's the high priest or the king who is performing the ritual, he can walk around the nails, incensing and speaking and singing hymns or whatever, and his footprints imprint in the sand. So when he's going to leave, he has to remove those footprints, and he does this with a branch. There's a tree called the hidden, H-I-D-N, the hidden tree, and he goes around and sort of like smooths out his footprints, and he's backing out. Then he gets to the door, he ties it with whether papyrus or whatever, puts the seal, and he removes himself, and then visit at the next serving or whatever. So we see this as interior and exterior, right? So the door leaves of the sky are open on earth, so that the foreign lands of Egypt might gleam by means of his forms of manifestation. That is to say, when God arises in the morning on the horizon, and he shines his light and enlightens everything, he brings life to, well, be in the northern hemisphere. Nothing grows in winter, but in summer, as we saw, as the earth turns and the sunlight hits the earth, life is again returned. So when the deity, the sun god, emerges on the horizon, you say, well, 7 o'clock, the sun is up. No, the sun been up since 4 o'clock. And we see a red ball in the fire. That's, again, Egyptian belief that that's the afterbirth of the god, the sun god, goddess. Nut gives birth to the sun in the morning at 4 o'clock. And then his batch demons, Horus and Thoth, send the water in the bathtub, and they test it to see it's not too hot. And then they put the god in there, wash him up, and this and that. And then that's theoretical. What happens down here is practical. But based on this, we assume that what we're doing here for him is what they do for him up there. So it's a transposition of a philosophical idea from heaven to earth and earth to heaven. And again, I mentioned it before, even I'm confused because, okay, so we know that on earth, that the God gets a morning meal, a midday meal, and an evening meal. We know that he gets a meal in the morning, and then he travels across the horizon. The thing that bothers me or questions me is whether he stops at midday to have a bite. Okay? They stop making these or whatever. So what we think is that when he went on the image on earth gets his midday meal in transposition. The essence of that meal goes to the heavens, and without stopping, or he's eaten on the way, the sun gets his lunch, and then at evening time, when he enters into the horizon, at the end of the day, he gets his dinner down there. Then he has to go through the underworld and then re-emerge on the horizon in the next morning to continue. Okay, it's been said that we moderns see in the great distance, but we have to understand that we moderns are standing on the shoulders of those who came before. The Egyptians were writing, Africans were writing on a tabula rasa, that is an empty slate. I remember when I was teaching in primary school, and the kids be fighting to wash the board at the end of the school day. So that when I come back in the morning, I have a nice clean board. So these people, these Africans, were writing on the board of history as original thinkers, right? When we talk about the knowledge and the falsification of history, and I said that these people know the difference, we have to understand how okay, in this book that I'm writing called about Temple Luxor, I try not to get into this thing about the Masons and all that, because that's where they learned it. Right? But some of the people, the earlier writers, try to push the notion of Atlantis as being the originator of some of the culture, the knowledge of Egypt. But we ask ourselves, well, if that is so, when did Atlantis begin? Okay, the argument, especially in the 19th century, that the Egyptians came from Southwest Asia, well, when did they arrive? According to Eduardo Neville, they came in the Old Kingdom, and they found the culture, but they just added a new impetus, I-M-P-E-T-U-S, to the existing culture. Right? They didn't mean that they brought in white skins and magic, you know, like the baker goes into the bakery with empty hands and you find the flour and everything on the table and start. So what they did is demonstrate the beginnings of white racism, because okay, I was in Edfu Temple in the Corridor of Victory in 2022, and I met this young Frenchman, and he struck up a conversation. He told me he was learning hieroglyphics, you know, and he says, you know, there was an element of racism in the beginning of the knowledge of these people, because the writers said that these people were incapable of making these things because they were black. Racism, okay? So we asked about, so this is what Neville is arguing, right? Dr. Diop demolished all of that. So I asked, when did these people come? Now, what does the record show? The records show that, okay, Egyptians at 35,000 had their procession of 26,000 years of stargazing. Right? To measure one precession, you need to know two, which is 52,000 years. 2010, I took my son to the rally in the mall, and then I went to hear Dr. Finch, you know, and he said, you know, there was a third recession. Well, if there was a third recession, it meant that there was a fourth recession, which we're looking at 26,000, 52,000, 78,000, 104,000 years of African astronomy. In 2012, it was discovered in South Africa, a paint pot with a brush and red paint. There's always been this argument that the Egyptians were different than the Africans because the Egyptians were red people. Well, let's wait a minute, because recently they found some people in the New World, I think in South America, who were painting red. So are they red people? Are they Egyptians? Okay, so you're trying to imagine this guy, well, you got a paint pot, and you got a brush, you got a paint, and it's, so try to construct a figure around the paint pot. And then there was an article, there was a commercial where this lady and her husband went to this architect, and she gave him a one of these, you know, in the bathroom, the faucet. She said, I want you to build a house around this faucet. That's all she had. So you got a paint pot with paint and a brush. So construct a man holding the paint and thinking about putting his work on the wall. He's thinking. He moves complex thinking far back because he's been dated at 104,000 years, 107,000 years. I spoke here some time back about the discovery of an architect, a carpenter's structure joined together two pieces of wood that had to have been done by a carpenter. And this has been dated 500,000 years, 500,000 years. Recently, within the last 2 weeks or so, they discovered in East Africa, Kenya, the discovery of tools made dated at 1.5 million years old, right? So all of this here to the south of Egypt, in the millions of thinking people, where does Atlantis come from? Where did they get their knowledge from, right? So we got to deconstruct everything that the European teaches us because it's full of distortion and omission. Okay, and this is what some of my work for the young people is based on, because we got to have the truth. Dr. James said, Dr. Leonard James, we will search for truth and expose it. Okay, let me stick on to my. So the temple was a sky on earth, but at the same time it was sky and earth. It was a vessel of sacredness in the profane world. So the temple itself is the essence of sacredness, and all around was madness. And it was the world that the omnipotent God filled to its limits. The symbolism of the temple and the concept of the divine were interrelated. The temple was an image of the cosmos, and the God who dwelt in it was the universal God. In the late temples, the Greco-Roman temples, Philae, Dendera, Esther, Edfu, Komombo, the world was present for the God in his house. Above all, the world was the land, or as the Egyptian put it, the entire land, or the two lands. That is why the Memphite theology that depicts Ptah as the first great philosopher, creator God, is often referred to as the land. So the land itself was God, and he brought it in his essence. In Egyptian theology, there are different centers which have seemingly different versions of creation. Dr. Carrera says these are not competing entities, but they're same entities seen through different lenses. For example, at Heliopolis, and Dr. Diop points to Emile Amelino, the Frenchman, who said that Heliopolis, where Ra was worshipped in the vicinity of the pyramids, was founded by the black people called Anu, who sailed down the Nile. They founded cities as Esna and Komombo, and Ra worshipped at Heliopolis. So at Heliopolis, Ra was worshipped. At Memphis, Ptah was worshipped. At Hermopolis, Thoth was born. At Karnak, Amun was worshipped. At Elephantine, Khnum was worshipped, and he was also worshipped at. So these different entities of creative gods were no different. It was the same manifestation, just like how I said that Hathor was Setnet. She was also Isis. She was different personifications of the divine spirit. Okay, so in the temples, the world was present for the God in his house. above all, that world was the land, or as if you should put the entire land, the land of Egypt. Okay, there were possessions and personifications and 42 nomes. Oftentimes, when you look at the outer wall of the temple, and Denver is a good example because it has very good preserved images of the Nile gods at the base of the temple on the exterior. There are images of the Nile gods, 42 of them, bringing the fruits of their domain to the temple as offerings. Okay, so we see these processions of these deities graphically ordered from south to north of rows of these people depicted offering the products of their nome to the chief deity of the temple, in this case Dendera, Hathor, and so forth. Geographical hints establish a relationship between the chief deity and the succession of principal deities to each of the 42 nomes. Just before the entranceway to Dendera stands. Okay, so once you get to Dendera, there is an overhead enclosure to the entire structure, and there is a great court today filled with remains of excavated pieces of associated structures. Right? So you have the Roman baths, you have within the mud brick enclosure, you have walls that surround the structure. Just to the right, on entering through the remaining ruins of the pylon, is the Mamisi. The Mamisi was a concept that the Romans introduced, which was a separate house where the young god was born. So the deity, female deity, she got pregnant and she went into the birth room, which was called a Mamisi, and she gave birth to the young son. Because remember now, that each one of these temples had generally a triad, a male deity, a female deity, and the son who was an offspring of the two. And then there's, you have sacred lake and things like that, right? Okay, especially we haven't gone into the temple of Denver yet, but in the back, okay. Two things of note at Denver. On the left side, or the eastern wall, exterior wall, and the western exterior wall, there are two images of the 23 crowns of Egypt. There were 23 crowns, and each one is listed differently, is depicted differently. Right? And on the back wall of the temple is a monumental figure of Cleopatra. And many people argue, in fact, who she was. I was looking at something the other day on one of these channels, and it was showing you when Hathor, Isis worship, got to Egypt, the images that they project is of a white woman. Okay? So there's been a big argument as to who was Cleopatra. Okay, two of our great scholars, Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark, differ as to who, in fact, Hathor was. Pardon me. Dr. Ben said that she was the last of a line of hated Greek rulers. Dr. Clark said she was an African queen who dealt the cards that she was played. Who played the cards she was dealt in the changing geopolitical reality of Egypt's enemies coalescing on the country, and then she's left with a heritage to defend. And so, rather than prosecute herself, she ended up dead before the sun, sort of. So, many people question whether this was her and what she looked like. She didn't have enough of she didn't have enough of an African feature scenario, so it could not have been her. And Dr. Diop said, we have a problem with the, I think it's come back, right? He said that the ancient artists knew enough about their subject to picture them the way they saw them. So according to him, Diop, that image created back then, I remember we said that the temples were built under the supervision of the priest, so they must have known what she looked like, and therefore the ancient artists know what their subjects look like. Okay. So let's go to the temple of Dendera. Okay. So while the temple's pronaos, that is the entrance, is imposing with 6 huge, what would be considered the first or the great hypostyle hall has 6 rows of columns. The first row of 6 across has screen walls. That is to say, they're joined by a screen, 3 on the side, 3 on the side, and they're 4 deep for 24. The ceiling is one of the most spectacularly decorated of all in ancient survival ceilings in all of ancient Egypt. Remember I said that the Greeks built the temples, but the Romans decorated it. So on the cornice of the Temple of Dendera, there is an inscription which says it is built by the Emperor Tiberius, the young Augustus, son of the divine Augustus, under the prefect Auletus, Avilas Flaccus, the governor Crispus, and this district governor Serapion, the inhabitants of the capital and the nome that dedicated the praenos to the great goddess Aphrodite. The goddess Aphrodite is actually Hathor, but by the time she got to Rome, they changed the name. Again, she got to untangle all of this, the Greeks called, we know that Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure built the 3 great pyramids on the Giza Plateau, but the Greeks changed it to Cheops, Mycerinus, so again, Petrie was, as I said, the great changer, if you will. So the proper entrance to the temple opens to a great hypostyle hall, followed by a small hypostyle hall. Inside this first hall, the forest of enormous capped columns of the 6 screen facade type and 18 others within support the high roof, beautifully decorated ceiling. The decorated ceiling magnificently depicts the heavenly drama of divinities in cosmic and perennial parade. The ceiling is divided into 7 sections, 1 in the center aisle and 3 on each side of the center. Right. In her description, Upper Egypt and Nubia, Jill Carmel says, and this is the description of the ceiling, 3, the center, and then 3 others. In the first section, to the extreme left on entering, is the elongated figure of Nut, who gives birth to the sun in the morning, and then swallows it up at the end of the day after he has traversed the ceiling. The sky god, her body arches over the heavens, and her legs and arms represent the 4 pillars of the universe. The long lines of figures include 6 signs of the Egyptian zodiac: the lion, the serpent, the balances, the scorpion, the archer, and the goat. There are 18 ships in the second line, which are the controllers of the 18 sections of 10 days. So 10 days is 18 times 10 is 180. And then on the other side, you have 18 ships over 10 days, so 180. So these two sides create the concept of the 360 circle. There are 18 ships in the second line, which are the controllers of 18 sections of 10 days. These are the divisions of the half year. The second section has a wind figure representing the wind at each end. Here, the astronomical figures relate to the 12 hours of night. The controllers are grouped into threes to represent the spaces of a lunar month. 10, 20, 30 days for the month. The third section concerns the moon, represented as a sacred eye. We call it the eye of Horus. The 14 days of the waning moon, followed by 14 days of the waxing moon, ascending the steps to heaven to approach Osiris, who is seated in the boat with Isis and Nephthys. In the middle section, who had alternate vultures and discs with wings. The fifth section, on that side, the next side, has 3 rows of figures. Among them are 12 boats representing the hours of the day, each bearing the Sundays, and beside each is a deity to which that special hour was sacred. The sixth section once again has the winged figure of the wind at each end and astronomical figures between them. The second section, like the fish, shows the elongated figure of Nut, the sun, the sky gods spanning the heavens, and at the northern end, the sun's rays shining on the shrine of Hathor. Among the figures of the line of figures represented are the other 6 signs of the Egyptian zodiac: the crab, the twins, the bull, the ram, the fishes, and the water carrier. 18 ships, each bearing Dekar. 18 times 10 is 180, and 18 times 10, 180, a total of 360. The earliest Egyptian years had 360 days, but then what is called the days of the epigraphical days, which is the days of the first, they added 5 days. So the days are called the epigraphical days, and the days represented by the births of Osiris and Isis, Set and Nephthys, and Horus. Okay, the elder Horus. Remember, Kamambo has two goddesses, 2 gods, the elder Horus and the crocodile god Sobe. The difference between the elder Horus and the younger Horus. Elder Horus is Osiris' brother, who was born on the 5th day, and the younger Horus was the god who was born from the union between Osiris and Isis. Conversely, so 36 in all, 18 and 18 is 36 times 10, 360. So the early year had 360 days. So with the birth of the 5 gods, the year was extended to 365 days. But they realized that 365 days was still a short day. So every year they lost a quarter of a day. And it took them 1,460 years to readjust the calendar to 365 and quarterly. When Julius Caesar came in 30 BC, he added a quarter of a day so that every 4 years we celebrate the Julian calendar. So that added the 365 and 4 quarters. So every 4 years we have an extra day. the Julian calendar that Julius Caesar, based on the Egyptian system, introduced into Rome, introduced in Western Union after 30 BC, it remained in existence until 1582, where Pope Gregory changed from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar, which is what the calendar we celebrate today. But all of these calendars are based on the root that was developed in Egypt, where, well, in Egypt today, okay, Egypt celebrates 4 different types of calendars. Okay, we have the farmer's calendar, we have the religious calendar, we have the Islamic calendar, and we have the European calendar. Okay, now, the Islamic calendar only has 354 days because their calendar is based on moon. And the Prophet Muhammad prohibited his followers from adding or changing what he set up. So their calendar is based on the moon. The farmer's calendar is based on the inundation of the river. The Coptic calendar is based on the ancient religious system, and the European calendar is based on what we celebrate today, which is the Greco-Roman Western tradition. So, how much time do I have left? Enough? With 10 minutes? Okay, so.
We got about 10, 15.
Okay, Simpkins now. I mentioned that how John Camille described the ceiling. Simpkins offers a somewhat scaled-back version describing the same ceiling decoration, stated, bang on. Remember I said there is sections. She called it sections 1, 2, 3. The middle sections 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He called it bands. Band 1 in the western section of the ceiling shows Nut, the goddess of the heavens, in her usual posture with her fingers and toes stretching and touching the wall at the 4 cardinal points. Her slender body arching over, forming the dome of heaven. The god Geb represents the earth. Beneath Nut are the 6 northern signs of the zodiac. Aries, the ram. He was Amun. Taurus, the bull. Apis, Gemini, the twins, 2 sprouting plants. Cancer, the crab. Anubis, Leo, the lion. Osiris, and Virgo, the virgin. Isis. At the end of the ceiling is a 7th band in a similar figure of Nut above the remaining 6 signs of the zodiac. Libra, the scales. Scorpio, the scorpion, Typhon. Sagittarius, the archer. Capricorn, the goat. Mendes, Aquarius, the water carrier. And Pisces, the fishes. Nephthys. Even for the Simpkins contingent, the 2nd and 6th bands have at either end a winged figure representing the wind. The 12 hours of the night are also represented. The 3rd band shows the moon, represented by the sacred eye, and the course of the sun during the 12 hours of the day. The 4th band, which is the center, is decorated with vultures and wingdits. The 5th band shows 12 hours of the day, represented by boats bearing sun discs and figures of gods to whom each hour was sacred. The entire scheme is highly intricate and comprised with the massive columns of the Great Hall. It's all very impressive. A door surmounted by a concave cornice and a round molding leaves it small. So when you enter the temple into the Great Hypostyle Hall, and then there's a 2nd hall and there's subsequent spaces that lead you to the sanctuary, and around the sanctuary will be 11 different rooms, if you will, for different things that are associated with the ritual of the goddess. Okay, so the small hypostyle hall The 6 columns, the scene in the spot, beginning at the right at the entrance, depict the pharaoh wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt, leaving his palace. Very often, not very often do you see surviving images that show the king leaving his palace to enter into the temple. There is one at Medinet Habu, 20th dynasty, Ramses III, where we see that. But very few of them have survived. Okay, because Denver is one of the best preserved temples because the entire surrounding wall of the temple protected the contents within. Whereas in different places like Komombo and other places, it was open and therefore the elements and humans destroyed much that would have taught us even more about that structure. So a lot of what we know is based on reconstruction, based on some texts and our own imagination. The scene in the small Hagsar hall beginning and right at the entrance depicts the pharaoh wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt, leaving his palace, preceded by standards of kindness and thieves and horse and a priest burning incense. The pharaoh cutting the first side of the temple before Hathor, shaping the first brick for the building, performing a foundation ceremony before Hathor, presenting the temple to Hathor and to her son, presenting a spear to Horus of Edfu, and in the final scene, burning incense before Hathor. This idea of the brick indicates that the concept that is celebrated here is an ancient concept because they had moved, in the beginning, they built temples with bricks. But by the time of this new Greco-Roman period, they're building with stone, quarried stone. But they're practicing the ancient concept that began at the beginning of. So what we learn from the Egyptians that they were great traditionalists, right? They changed very slowly because according to tradition, this is how we did it, and and that's one of the things why they remain so consistent. If you change, we know that change is imminent, right? Is imminent, but once you change is change. Change brings change, and so what you start with is not what you end up with because you're in a state of flux owing to change. So that is why, again, now if you will, the power of the priests who inveigled the Roman emperors to build these temples enabled them to help preserve the ancient tradition which we see in these temples. These temples were so illustrated. Scholars have counted measured the illustrations in the miles. The whole, if you look at I talk about the outer walls where you have on the left side the eastern wall and the western wall where you have the 23 crowns, images of the 23 crowns. I didn't mention the fact that once you enter into the great hypostyle hall, on a column to the right over there, there's another image. So there's actually 3 images of the 23 crowns of Egypt. But if you look at the walls, you will see untold numbers of panels depicting the gods being worshipped either by the king or other gods, and this is how the priests were able to have their ancient tradition preserved so that we can learn from it and edify ourselves and guard ourselves to contend with the changes that are expected, what we have to withstand. Okay, so once we go to we go past the first hypostyle hall, the second hypostyle, we enter a vestibule before the sanctuary. And in the rooms to the side of the 11 rooms to the side of the sanctuary, we have, what do we have? We have what each room was dedicated to. The area of vestibule is flanked by some 12 adjacent rooms designed for linen robes of the goddess, especially a silver room, comprised silver vessels used in the ritual. This leads to a small court hosting a chapel whose ceiling depicts, the goddess knew there is in the temple of Dentura a separate courtyard, small, that leads to a chapel where on the ceiling the goddess Nut is shown in her traditional posture of giving birth to the sun in the morning and swallowing him up at eventide. So, but there are these 12 rooms that are designed for food offerings, vestments, incense, the jewelry, water, and different things. And then in this temple itself, there are 15 crypts. The crypts were mostly underground, where sacred vessels and images of the goddess were kept. Remember now, for the most part, much of what has become profane today was not designed to be seen by profane eyes. Okay, the gods were worshipped in their homes, and that was a privilege. That was a privilege that was extended only to a select few people. So, I want to speak about Edfu, Kamambo, Esna, and Philae, but I often reminisce with people. I'm not sure if they always say we gotta have you back, but I'm not sure if they'll have me back here because sometimes you say things that are controversial. Say, yeah, we'll have you back, but they never do. But in the event that I'm brought back, then I don't have to move on to another topic or just to further edify you about the other Greek and Roman temples. But perhaps I can maybe, when I come back from Egypt, about Dr. Lewis always wants me to give an update on what's happening there, because there have been a lot of exciting new discoveries in Egypt within the last couple of weeks. The discovery of the tomb of Thutmose II. He was the husband of Hatshepsut. And he died early, and she took over rather than allow Thutmose III to ascend the throne. When he ascended the throne, some say that he got rid of her. One scholar has shown an image. Remember now, a lot that we need to know, that we need to have, we don't have. But there's one surviving image where he is a part of the cortege that was burying her. So in that respect, he could not have hated he could not have hated her to such an extent that he was upset because she kept him from the throne for 20 years. What he did do, he's credited with reigning for 54 years, but once he ascended the throne, he added her 20 years as his 21st year, so he gets credit for reigning for 54 years. And it turns out that he did a lot of work at Karnak Temple. And of course, Karnak Temple is the great, it's called a temple of vegetative construction. That is to say, whereas Temple of Luxor was built first by Amenhotep and then by Ramses II over a 100-year period. Karnak took 2,000 years to build, so it grew over a period of time as each pharaoh vied to add something in praise of the God who resided there. Right? Dr. Ben often instructed his students who visited Karnak Temple, one, to pay attention to the architecture, but two, visit the Hypostyle Hall in Karnak Temple at least 5 times, 6 times. So you begin to not be hurried, because he said it may take you 10 years to really study what is you're looking at in that temple, in that Hypostyle Hall. What's the Hypostyle Hall? The Hypostyle Hall, I have a book on the Hypostyle Hall. I've been working over time to get a number of things that before the end of the year I will have. Well, that will be one of the books. But the Hypostyle Hall is the hall that precedes the sanctuary. It is the transitional place from the profane to the sacred. It is also the place where the procession assembles, either for the ritual within the temple or to begin a journey outside of there, outside of the temple, to some other distant location to celebrate the open festival, the festival of the valley, the festival of men. And I wanted to do a piece on the festivals, the principal festivals, open men, 10-day, the valley festival, and so forth. But as Ben say, you can't be hurried in the Hypostyle Hall. You gotta visit at least 10 times, 5 times. This will be for this new century. When I return later within the next 2 or 3 months, I'm not giving
You got about 10 more minutes.
when I return, that will be about my 16th time in that temple, in that hall, the hall. I mean, I've been to Egypt because I used to travel with Dr. Lewis back in the late 80s or early 90s or stuff like that. But for this new century, I've been there 16 times. I didn't go for the thing. Anyway, so he gave me a little more time, so let me see if I can push some more information to you. Okay? So I tell you that the temple is the sky. Okay, I told you about the hall. Okay, so into the past this small Hypostyle Hall, we have the Hall of Offerings. Entrances in the Hall of the Cycle, it's called the Cycle of the Gods. This chamber was a place where priests and priestesses after assembly. It was called the Hall of the Altar. Here the offerings were made. There were of fruit, flowers, drinks of various kinds, food, incense, and other items. The chambers beyond were entered only by the king as supreme high priest or his representatives who were also priests of high rank. Let me see what I can sketch within a few minutes. Okay, Edfu, right? So the temple is oriented in north to south direction with the great pylon entrance located in the south beyond the Mamisi. Now, Edfu and Deborah are interrelated because Hathor, the goddess of Deborah, was the wife of Horus and Edfu, and there will be a festival of the great meeting, I think that's the name of it, where she would leave her temple and journey by boat to his temple, and they would meet and they would have their fun or whatever. So this is celebrated, one of the great festivals. I mentioned Obed Min Valley, 10-day, but this is a later festival between these two deities. Edfu is an the temple for it. There's a struggle between Seth and Horus. Again, just like how Hathor's temple is thought to have existed from the beginning of time, so too Horus's temple had to, because he was engaged in this fight against his uncle, and once he had killed him or captured him, the fight was basically mythological good against evil and stuff like that, and it's filled with the parameters that we are associated with. But once he, according to the story, once he had captured Seth and ended the struggle, he built this temple. And he is associated with the prehistoric period where Horus of the blacksmith went north. So just as how, according to Dr. Diab, Amelinu told you that the Anu people left Central Africa and sailed down the Nile, so too did Horus. Who went north with his fathers. Yeah, well, I'll open up for any questions. I'm sorry. Yes, sister.
Shalom.
Yeah.
I'm listening to you and you had mentioned Cleopatra. And from what the research has been done, and I know within experts there's always varying
Disagreements, yes.
Yes. It says
Viewpoints.
that she was a descendant of Ptolemy. Now, I think when you were talking, you said that the way she's depicted, I guess she didn't have what would have been quote-unquote Afrocentric features as we would see it of today. So I guess there is a debate whether or not she was, I wouldn't say melanated, because most people in that time period that you're talking about were melanated people. But I guess my question is, if she was a descendant of Ptolemy and they were of Macedonian descent, are you saying that the ancient Macedonians who ruled Greece at the time were people of color? How would they have looked? I guess that's more my question, because I'm trying to understand. I've seen pictures of drawings of what Cleopatra, what she would have looked like, but is that correct, or was that just based, as you say, on the artist, the way they felt about her? Because you said artists knew a lot about the subject when they depicted, pictures or, the.
Well, Dr. Diab said that the artists knew what the images looked like.
Okay.
We got to understand that even the Bible that has come down to us is an edited book.
Of course.
Right? So much of the images that confronts us today are projected by a set of an ideology that comes out of the superiority of the slave trade concept God made man his own image. God is white.
No.
In the
I'm sorry. It's a reflex. I apologize. You're done. Facetious.
God made man his own image.
Yes.
God is white.
Okay.
In the natural order, white is superior to black.
Yes.
So in the scientific order, so in the social order. So therefore, white is over black. That's their version.
Okay.
That's not the true version. You go into some churches today and you see this beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy, Jesus Christ. Now, the fellow had that T-shirt that said Jesus was a black man. I was showing my daughter today. I was showing my daughters today the image of Amun in the Temple of Luxor, who is depicted in blackface in 18th dynasty. Alright? And he's in the Temple of Luxor. You can't take no pictures in there.
Yes.
They have guards. Madam Sanel allowed me to take a picture of him,
Yes.
right? But in Ramses' temple at Abu Simbel,
Yeah.
again, Amun is depicted in blackface.
Okay.
The symbolists, I'm preparing a lecture
Okay.
on the black gods
Okay.
of ancient Egypt. Right? The symbolists swallowed the abyss in looking at the image of the festival of men in the temple of Ramses III at Medina Nabu. He says, and I quote, scholars, after the reading in the festival of men, after the reading of the book of the Negro,
Yes.
scholars are puzzled. Why is a black guy, why is a Negro standing right here? I went there to see what is the face that he's talking about.
Yes.
This is Africa. But they don't give you that, they don't speak that. Just like, I'm coming. Just as how they never tell you about the Nubian lady coming out of the head of the cow in the procession of the princess to Luxor temple. Yes, sir.
Yeah, lady.
I was trying to ask you something before, but no. They said there was 5 Cleopatras.
She was the 8th one. She was
seven.
the one that we're talking about is the 8th.
It's the 8th. So they asked, okay. All right, so
Cleopatra the
they got
8th.
clarification. You know, they said.
That's why you see, there was, as I said, there was this division or distinction between Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark, right? And we got to understand that, well, how the history is projected today is not how the history was projected in ancient times, okay? Dr. Ben says she is a descendant of the hated Townleys. Dr. Clark said she was an African queen who was dealt the cards that she had to play.
Okay.
And she decided, like maybe the woman that, black African woman isn't, that before the sun. So.
And the one that Dr. Ben spoke of was mixed with Asian. They would marry into, what he said, they married into the families. Yeah.
Well, Chancellor Williams, that Guerrero speaks about some group, I think, in Jersey that dealing with Chancellor Williams' book, Destruction of Black Civilization. But Chancellor Williams talks about the 18th dynasty. Remember, the 17th was actually 17th dynasty coming from Nubia, held Thebes as its capital, and they're the ones who formed the 18th dynasty. He says that the 18th dynasty began black, but ended white. So there was, there were these political marriages,
Of course.
right? Because foreign states wanted to have some, to be in the shadow of the Egyptian god king, right? Dr. Theophilo Bender talks about the Asian princesses who came to Egypt to marry the king. But he said, oh, they were all harem ladies. They didn't sit on the great throne, okay? Nefertiti, she came to marry Tutmosis, Amenhotep III, and got lucky because Queen T, who was really the power behind it, chose, okay, my husband is too old, marry my son, but she's the only one. But basically, the Cleopatras that you're talking about are descendants of that line that was broken by the Roman invasion.
Good job.
Yes, sir.
No, I just take a few minutes to bring up some concepts for the group to consider.
Okay. Thank you.
When you're in Egypt, and you go and you look at the different statues,
Okay.
and you even see many of the statues that they used to display in high. And when you look at the drawings on the walls and you look at other things, when you actually go in,
Yes.
you're going to find that the Egyptians came black as coal.
Okay.
They came brown and light brown with mixtures of no white.
Yes.
Many of these scholars give their opinions.
Okay, yes.
But as Dr. Ben pointed out to us, the Egyptians told you where they came from. I don't know what he says and he says and he says. Everybody got it, but you see it in their writings. They said we came from the beginning of the Nile.
And what is of the Nile?
Wait now. Finch didn't say, Finch wasn't there, I wasn't there, Doc wasn't there. All of these experts
Weren't they?
they said it in writing and it's there. We came, Egyptians, from the beginning of the Nile. Where's the Nile begin? Ethiopia and Central Africa.
Okay, you're right.
The blue and the white Nile, they meet at Sudan and they go in.
Okay.
So those people that they're talking about, the Egyptians were living from what you now call the tip of Cairo
Yes.
all the way down to, let's say, the so-called Sudanese border. Dr. Ben said, and you see it, it works, that that complex of Ethiopia, Sudan, and what you call Egypt, they all were combined.
One, because that's why they referred Upper and Lower Egypt. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, continue.
They tell you. So they could argue not all these people, where, they told you. You and I are going to, and they told you in their writing, you see the various colors. They don't mix it. You see the noses and the lips, and in many of the pictures, you can find that when you go, you see troops, light-skinned troops, black troops.
Yes.
For me, I haven't had enough of the specific background.
Yes.
Dr. Ben took us to Egypt, he took us to Ethiopia, and he took us to Sudan.
Sudan.
I was only able to get to Egypt and Ethiopia and Sudan once.
Okay.
We were supposed to go the second time because he wanted us to show us the small pyramid that precedes any of the pyramids that were first built in Egypt. He tells you that Egypt is not the beginning, it's the ending of this great Nile.
Okay.
And he took you there to Ethiopia to show you that what was there, brothers and sisters who've been to Ethiopia, they can take. You see what was there before there was any Egypt. When you go to Sudan, I've been to Sudan, I've been to the small pyramids. They precede the big pyramids. Not only do the Egyptians say, they tell you, you separate the Ethiopian, there's no separation. So there. Also, in Egypt has a set of a god called God, I can't think of his name, it'll come to me. That god is short stature. That's the Twa, who you now call a pygmy. They proceed in terms of development and culture. Before they study Egypt, they keep talking about Egypt, but nobody ever talks about Ethiopia. They don't talk about Sudan. Sudan's pyramids are smaller, they're older than Egypt. God happy, no, okay, it'll come to me. That God is both male and female. One of the oldest gods in Egypt, the short statured one. Monderson, what's the name of the short statured African? It's a male and female. They show you God is both male and female. What's the name of the short statured God? It slips me, but so when these people start categorizing God, you see it. The Egyptians said, this is our most ancient God, and goddesses, it's both male and female. Okay? Now, when they start talking about what they white and what they this, what you need to do is go online and YouTube. Putin put out, opened up. You saw he opened up? And then you ask yourself, they're Orthodox Christians.
Yes.
Why is everybody in that whole pantheon of Orthodox Christians in Russia?
Yes.
They all look like you.
They do.
They Africans, they dark skinned, they black, ain't no white in there.
I know.
You know why? Because you'll get to it later. As Dr. Ben says, his book,
They all look alike.
not only look, his book, he wrote a book, Africa, Mother of Western Civilization, Western Religion.
Yes.
Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they all come from there.
Yeah.
So you ask yourself, how do these Russians become Christians? Because when Christianity was brought up out of Africa, it spread into what is now Mediterranean Europe,
Yes.
and it spread into Russia.
Russia.
And Christianity came from Africa as one of the byproducts of all of the religion, okay?
Yes.
So you look at it, you look at it, they're all black.
Of course.
So when we deal with the Moors,
Yes.
you can't deal with the Moors until you deal with Egypt,
Yes.
until you deal with Carthage.
Yes.
There's a whole set of what that whole area is before you even get these Germanic tribes you call Anglo-Saxons. They're late in the game. All these white people talk about this. The white Anglo-Saxon, the white German and stuff, they're late in the game.
Okay.
Okay, so they can argue all you want about Cleopatra.
Yeah.
And then we get into what do the people of that part of Europe look like? You're looking at Greeks.
Some of them are.
You're looking at Greeks now, but it was a different ancient world.
All right, Doc.
When Dr. Ben showed when you see it. So this, the
So the ancient
only
Ptolemy, who was Macedonian.
look,
And
you
I-
gotta actually see it, and you gotta go back and trace. All of these scholars, they all dancing around this basic knowledge.
Yes. Yes.
They're dancing around the basic knowledge. Everything you see in Europe came out of Africa. Why is the
All right, Doc.
okay?
Monderson,
Yeah.
5 minutes, wind it down.
Okay, much of the imagery is in quote unquote the African mold, M-O-L-D. Okay, for the most part, that Ben used to take his students to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He was controversial, right? So when he get there, he says, I want to see the primitives. So they said, well, I want to see the Africans over there. He said, but if primitive means early, I want to see the Egyptians. The things that are on display in these settings are the European images that has very little connection, true connection to the real ancient history. There is right now in Aswan, I mentioned that Dr. Lewis used to hold these dinners to raise funds for Dr. Ben to do his research on Elephantine Island, where he thought was the closest to the origin of the Egyptians. The people of Nabta Playa was to the south of what is called Abu Simbel, to the west of Abu Simbel, and they were beyond what is today's border with Egypt. Actually, the Egyptian border stretched much further into Nubia than it was before, right? But all of the images are in the African mold, but they don't show you those pictures. And when those pictures have survived, the facial features are disfigured, so because they betray what is being taught. Remember, okay, this lady, Lorna Oakes, right? 21st century, she says, we write for a European audience. They're not writing for you, okay? That is not to say that the Europeans didn't do the archaeological excavation to free the temple from the ravages of time, okay? They did it. Their works are some of them are true archaeological revelations. Now you gotta read it, but you also gotta read what's below the line, what's on top of the line, what's to the side of the line, what is the edge of the line, to get the true facts. the bottom line is that we're not giving up. We've just begun to fight. And our job is to reveal, to look for truth, search for truth, find it, and expose it. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, give Dr. Fred Monderson a great big hand. He will be back in a couple of weeks.
Okay, my brother, thank you. Nova.
Way to go, Dr. Monderson.
Yes, sir, thank you. All the best to you and the family. Yeah, okay. So, Lois.